middle of the forest you'll find a large lake, and sitting by that large lake, with a fishing rod in his hand, you'll find Jeff. Jeff is an older man, grey beard, balding, 5 foot 8 inch tall, slim build. His father used to take him here every weekend until he sadly passed away. But the passing of his father never stopped him coming out to try his luck. Even if he didn't catch anything, he didn't mind. The peacefulness of the forest, the birds chirping, the various animal sounds kept Jeff's mind off the fact that he was alone in this world. Jeff's wife and 2 kids had sadly passed away 2 years ago in a horrific car accident on their way down Mount Cootha. The only friends he had were at work, but he didn't see them much. Jeff was a train driver in Brisbane, which means he only saw his friends on shift change or before work. When Jeff was an adult, his dad and himself bought a small block of land in the woods about 1 kilometre away from the creek. The plan was to build a small cabin on the block. When it was finally finished, they made the habit of going there and staying until morning, bonding and having a chat around a campfire over a couple of beers. It was their father-son time, and they cherished every minute of it. As Jeff was sitting by the creek, he started to think about the great times he and his dad had all those years ago. He started to drift off to sleep. When Jeff woke up, he looked around and realised the sun had fallen and night was upon him. He wasn't too worried about being out at night. After all, he had done the trek hundreds of times, and he knew he had a torch with him. Not a powerful one, but a torch nonetheless. He began to wind his line in. He folded his chair, took his torch out of his bag, turned it on, and put his bag on his back. He looked out towards the direction he had to go, then looked at his torch, and how little it actually helped him. I really need a new torch. He then began his walk back to the cabin. When he was about 300 metres from the cabin, he got an overwhelming sense that he was not alone. Someone or something was watching him. He stood silently on the path, panning around, trying to spot something with the torch that was barely powerful enough for him to see 2 foot in front of him. He thought to himself, must be just an animal. He continued on his way, trying to escape the thoughts rushing through his mind. Suddenly, he hears a branch break behind him. He quickly turns around. He can't see much. The feeling of dread and danger completely overwhelms his body. He was scared like never before. Knowing he is only about 50 metres away from the cabin, he turns and starts to run as fast as his old legs can carry him. When he gets to the cabin, he opens the door, goes inside, slams the door shut, puffing and out of breath. Jeff just leans against the door, hoping whatever he saw doesn't try to break into the cabin. After a while, and when his breath had slowed, although still scared to death, he slowly opens the door, just enough so he can look outside. He sees nothing. He quietly closes the door and walks to the other side of the cabin. Slowly and quietly, he moves the corner of the curtain to one side, just enough so we can see outside. He is in total shock as he sees, well, something. A humanoid figure standing around 8 foot tall with arms that are way too long to meet proportion of the body. It has an oddly shaped head. It kind of looks like a shape of an upside down pear. It is looking straight at Jeff. He is paralysed. He tries to move. He can't. This thing has a hold of him. He tries to scream. Nothing comes out of his mouth. Then, without warning, a bright light seems to come out of the figure, brighter than 50 suns. Jeff can finally move again. He drops the curtain and falls to the floor. Ah! I can't see! Feeling so much pain in his complete body, he feels like his whole body is on fire. It burns! It burns so much! Jeff passes out in pain. The next morning, Pete and Phil are walking up a trail in the woods when they begin to hear something. Did you hear that? Pete asks. Yeah, it sounded like somebody screaming. Where'd it come from? They both stop and listen. They hear it once again. This way! They both run as fast as they can to the voice. They can't hear it anymore. They both stop in silence, listening, waiting. The cabin! They both run towards the cabin. Pete bursts through the front door, closely followed by Phil. They both stand there in total shock as what they have encountered hits them to the core. Neither of them have ever seen anything like this in their entire lives. There lays Jeff with his hands over his eyes, flesh falling to the floor, blood surrounding him. Some section of Jeff's body, the flesh has fallen so much, the bone has been exposed. Jeff had heard the men enter the cabin, and in pure agony, "It burns! It burns! Help me! Please help me! It burns!" The men snap out of the trance-like state. Phil checks his phone. "Damn, no reception. I'll go and try to get reception and call for help. Hurry up, mate." Phil drops his bag to the floor and runs out of the cabin, leaving Pete to look after Jeff. "It burns! It burns! My friend has gone to get help. Get me some water. It burns so much." Pete runs into the kitchen, pours some water into a glass, and runs back and gives it to Jeff. "Here." With the top hand covering his eyes, Jeff reaches forward to grab the glass. Pete puts the glass in Jeff's hand. Jeff takes the water and pours it all over his body. Jeff lets out a scream so loud, with so much feeling, so much dread, Pete has to cover his own ears, as he had never heard any other human being in so much pain. When the screaming dies down a little, "What happened to you?" "Ah! It burns, help me!" Pete, who is completely overwhelmed by the situation he is facing, knows he needs to stay calm for the stranger's sake. "What's your name?" "Jeff." "I'm Pete. Someone should be here soon." "Please don't leave. It burns." "I'm not going anywhere. Where does it burn?" "Everywhere." "Everywhere? Like your whole body?" "Yes." "I'm going to lift your shirt and have a look underneath it, okay?" "Okay." Pete slowly lifts Jeff's shirt. Jeff lets out an ear-piercing scream. Pete is completely shocked with what he sees. Jeff's body is completely burnt. Pieces of flesh are attached to the inside of his shirt. What makes it worse? Jeff's shirt looks like it's stuck to his body. The shirt had been burned from the inside, from Jeff's body. Pete falls back in shock. Sitting on the floor, he just stares at Jeff, not knowing what to do or what to say, all while Jeff is screaming in pure agony. Pete tries to pull himself together. He stands. "It looks like you've been burned all over your body. What happened to you?" "Yeah, it burns! It burns!" Pete looks up at Jeff's face, his hands still covering his eyes. "Do your eyes burn? Is that why you're covering them?" "Yeah, they burn. They feel like they're on fire." "I'm going to have a look, okay?" "Okay." Pete kneels down next to Jeff's mangled body. He reaches for Jeff's hands that are still covering his eyes. He slowly lifts his hands. Jeff lets out another ear-piercing scream, even louder than before. The flesh around his eye sockets are stuck to his hands. Looking at the extra flesh on Jeff's hands, Pete slowly looks back at Jeff's eyes. Pete jumps to his feet, quickly rushes backwards until he crashes into the wall. He doesn't know what to do. He just stands there, looking at Jeff's body, listening to him scream out in pain. He hears sirens getting closer. Pete is stuck staring at Jeff, not believing what he is looking at. The door bursts open. The two paramedics burst through the door, then stop in their tracks when they see a man on the floor with pieces of flesh falling off his body. He is surrounded with flesh and blood. They hold their stomachs in as they rush to their patient. They look down at him, screaming in agony. They are completely in shock at what they see. Not only the flesh is falling off him, but they look up at his eyes. Again, they are in shock, for what they see will haunt them for the rest of their lives. His eyes are not there. His sockets are empty, but on closer examination, they are not completely empty. There is ash inside. His eyes were burned so badly they had turned to ash. The paramedics didn't know what to do. So they decided the only thing to do was to put him to sleep. So a paramedic grabbed a needle from their bag, put some liquid in it, and administered it to Jeff. Jeff instantly drifts off to sleep. Jeff wakes up in hospital covered in bandages from head to toe. He starts to move his head as he hears murmuring. He's waking up. Jeff, can you hear me? I can't feel anything. Where am I? You're in the hospital. We have given you something for the pain. What happened to you? Jeff proceeds to tell the doctor and everyone present what had happened in the woods. From falling asleep to the lake, to being followed, to seeing the 8-foot humanoid that cast that bright light. When he had finished, can you help me? I'm sorry, Jeff, but none of us know what happened to you. I rang professionals all around the world. They don't know either. We simply do not have an answer for you. We just don't know what to do except make you as comfortable as we can and to protect you from the pain. Sleep now, and I'll be back to check on you shortly. They all leave the room. 2 weeks later, Jeff would pass away peacefully in his sleep. To this day, there is still no answer to what had happened to Jeff. Today's episode of The Light was based off a true story. Accounts were taken from Jeff himself, obviously not his real name, the 2 paramedics that arrived in the cabin in the woods, the 2 hikers, and all staff in the hospital. Some people claim it was just a medical emergency. Others believe it was paranormal or even aliens. The truth is, nobody knows what happened to Jeff.